The night was suffocating, the kind where shadows seemed alive and every sound carried an ominous weight. I stood frozen as a group of men surrounded me, their faces hardened by cruelty, their voices dripping with threats that clawed at my sanity. They weren't just demanding money, they were toying with me, enjoying the fear in my eyes like predators savoring their prey. It all started because of Igor, that reckless son of a wealthy man who had gambled more than he could afford. His debts spiraled out of control, dragging innocent people into his mess, including me. These loan sharks weren't ordinary thugs. They were relentless beasts, hungry for blood if their demands weren't met. My heart pounded so loudly I thought it might burst through my chest. The air felt thick, almost unbreathable, as one of them grabbed my arm, his grip like iron, leaving bruises before he even tightened it. And then, like a storm breaking through the chaos, Igor's father arrived, Mikhailo, a man whose presence commanded both respect and dread. He barked orders, throwing stacks of cash onto the table, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "We're even," he declared coldly, glaring at the men until they retreated. But salvation came at a cost. As soon as the danger passed, Mikhailo turned to me, his expression shifting from relief to fury. "Do you realize how dangerous this is?" He snapped, his words sharp enough to cut glass. I wanted to scream back, to tell him that I hadn't asked for any of this, but the terror still coursing through my veins silenced me. His anger wasn't just directed at me, it was layered with frustration, guilt, and the immense pressure of protecting his family name while trying to save his son from himself. For Mikhailo, it wasn't just about settling debts. It was about shielding Igor, and perhaps himself, from the consequences of reckless privilege. The confrontation with Mikhailo occurred in the dimly lit hallway of his sprawling mansion, where every word echoed like a verdict. His towering figure loomed over me as he spoke, each syllable dripping with icy disdain. "You had no business involving yourself," he growled, his voice low but sharp enough to cut through steel. "Do you realize what your actions have done? Not only did you put yourself at risk, but you've also dragged my family's name through the mud." The accusation stung more than I cared to admit. I wasn't some reckless interloper. I was trying to protect Igor, a boy whose innocence seemed to be slipping away faster than anyone realized. But now, standing under Mikhailo's piercing gaze, I felt like an intruder guilty of far worse crimes. His words weren't just criticism, they were threats cloaked in civility. "If this happens again," he continued, pausing for effect, "I won't hesitate to make sure you regret it." My heartbeat quickened, though I tried to mask my fear behind a stoic expression. Was he implying legal action? Public humiliation? Or something even darker? For all his wealth and charm, there was an undeniable edge to Mikhailo, a man who valued control above all else. And here I was, perceived as someone disrupting that fragile balance. As if sensing my unease, he leaned closer, his breath warm against my ear. "This isn't about you or Igor anymore," he whispered harshly. "It's about preserving what matters most, my family's dignity." His tone shifted slightly, almost betraying a flicker of vulnerability. Did he truly believe I sought to harm them, or was this paranoia born from years of guarding his empire? Either way, I couldn't deny the weight of his words. My interference hadn't gone unnoticed, not by him, not by the shadowy figures lurking outside their home, and certainly not by Ira, whose sharp eyes had caught glimpses of our interactions. "I never intended to cause trouble," I replied finally, my voice trembling despite my best efforts to sound resolute. "But when someone is in danger, how can I stand aside?" Mikhailo's jaw tightened, and for a moment, I thought he might explode. Instead, he straightened up, smoothing the lapels of his expensive suit as though composing himself. "Good intentions mean nothing when they destroy lives," he said coldly before turning on his heel and disappearing into the shadows. Left alone, I exhaled deeply, realizing too late that my noble instincts had painted a target on my back and perhaps on those I loved most. Profile QW and 2.5-max, English version. The sterile white walls of the hospital corridor felt like they were closing in on me as I clutched the doctor's report in trembling hands. Stage 4 cancer. My mother, the woman who had raised me with nothing but love and sacrifice, was now fighting for her life, and I couldn't save her. The surgery alone would cost $30,000, an unimaginable sum that might as well have been millions given my financial situation. Every option seemed impossible. No savings, no backup plan, just the crushing weight of helplessness pressing down on me. When I called the insurance company to confirm coverage, their response hit me like a freight train. "Your policy expired 6 months ago," the representative said coldly, as if reading from a script. Expired? How could this happen? It wasn't negligence, it was human error, a misrenewal notice buried under piles of unread mail. But excuses didn't matter now. What mattered was that the one lifeline we'd relied on had snapped without warning. Tears blurred my vision as I realized there would be no safety net, no miracle bailout. Just me, standing at the edge of a cliff with nowhere to turn. Desperation clawed at my chest as I considered the choices before me. Borrowing money from loan sharks crossed my mind, a dark path paved with interest rates so high it would take years to repay. Or perhaps reaching out to strangers online, pleading for donations through crowdfunding platforms where success was far from guaranteed. Each idea came with its own set of consequences, none of them palatable. What kind of daughter was I if I let pride stand in the way of saving my mother's life? Yet, how could I live with myself knowing I'd sold my soul or risked our safety for fleeting hope? As I sat by my mother's bedside later that evening, watching her frail body struggle against the pain, guilt consumed me. Why hadn't I noticed sooner? Why hadn't I double-checked the paperwork? Her breathing grew shallow, each labored inhale a reminder of time slipping away. She reached for my hand weakly, her voice barely audible. "Don't cry, sweetheart," she whispered. "We'll get through this." Her words should have comforted me, but instead, they deepened the ache in my heart because I knew the truth. We wouldn't. Not unless something changed drastically. That night, sleep eluded me entirely. Images of my mother fading away haunted every waking moment. I thought about Mikhailo, his wealth, his influence. Could he help? No, I dismissed the thought almost immediately. Asking him would mean admitting defeat, revealing vulnerabilities I wasn't ready to share. Besides, after everything that had happened between us, the accusations, the tension, I doubted he'd even listen. Still, the seed of doubt lingered, gnawing at my resolve. If desperation pushed me too far, who knew what I might do next? It started subtly at first, a car parked too long outside my apartment, a shadow lingering near the hospital where my mother lay weak and vulnerable. I dismissed it as paranoia until one evening, while walking home from tutoring Igor, I noticed headlights trailing me through the dimly lit streets. My heart raced as I quickened my pace, but the vehicle stayed close, its engine growling like a predator stalking prey. By the time I reached my doorstep, my hands trembled so violently that I could barely unlock the door. The next morning, an anonymous text message confirmed my worst fears: leave this town or face the consequences. Attached was a photo of my frail mother in her hospital bed, her eyes closed, tubes snaking around her fragile body. It felt like a knife twisting into my chest. Someone knew exactly how to hurt me. I couldn't shake the feeling that Mikhailo was involved somehow. His sudden interest in my life had always been unsettling, but now it seemed darker, more invasive. Little did I know, his wife, Ira, harbored suspicions of her own. She had hired a private investigator to dig up dirt on me, convinced I was scheming to infiltrate their family. The detective unearthed fragments of misinformation, fabricated stories about debts I didn't know, relationships I never pursued, all designed to paint me as manipulative and untrustworthy. When confronted with these lies during dinner, Mikhailo's temper flared. "You think she's after our money?" He snapped at IRA, slamming his fist on the table. "Maybe you're just jealous because someone else has caught my attention." Their arguments grew louder, uglier, each word laced with venom. One night, Ira accused him outright of betrayal, her voice shaking with rage. "Do you love her? Is that why you can't stop watching her every move?" Mikhailo denied it fiercely, yet his silence betrayed him. For all his wealth and power, he was trapped in a web of his own making, torn between loyalty to his family and whatever twisted fascination he held for me. Meanwhile, I lived under constant threat, unsure whether the danger stemmed from Mikhailo's obsession or Ira's desperation to protect her marriage. Every knock on the door sent shivers down my spine. Every unfamiliar face became a potential enemy. And through it all, my mother fought for her life, oblivious to the storm raging around us. The night stretched endlessly, each hour heavier than the last. Sleep eluded me as visions of my mother's frail body haunted every moment of wakefulness. Her labored breathing echoed in my mind like a relentless metronome counting down to an inevitable end. I couldn't escape the suffocating guilt that clung to me, whispering cruel reminders of how powerless I was. Money, not love or effort, was the only thing standing between her life and death, and it felt like the universe was mocking me for lacking something so tangible yet unattainable. One night, as rain battered against the windows, I replayed the events leading up to her accident over and over again. If only I hadn't been so consumed with tutoring Igor, if only I'd stay home instead of chasing after some misguided sense of duty, she wouldn't have tried to reach the top shelf alone. The fall had seemed minor at first, but now doctors warned it could accelerate her condition. My chest tightened as tears streamed down my face. How many times had I told myself I was doing this for her? That teaching, working tirelessly, would somehow lead to a better future? But what good was any of it if she didn't survive long enough to see it? Sitting beside her bed later that evening, I held her hand, fragile and cold, tracing the veins beneath her paper-thin skin. Her eyes fluttered open briefly, meeting mine with a gaze that carried decades of sacrifice. "Don't cry, sweetheart," she murmured weakly, unaware of the storm raging inside me. But I couldn't stop. Not when memories of my father flooded back, his laughter silenced too soon. His final days spent in agony because we couldn't afford treatment. His death wasn't just a loss. It was a lesson etched into my soul about the brutal cost of poverty. And here I was, reliving the same nightmare, unable to save another parent from slipping away. I clenched my fists, nails digging into my palms. Why did it always come down to money? Why did the world punish those who lacked it while rewarding those who hoarded it recklessly? Mikhailo's face flashed through my mind, his wealth, his indifference masked by polished charm. For all his power, he could snap his fingers and solve problems most people couldn't even dream of fixing. Yet here I sat, drowning in debts I couldn't repay, watching helplessly as my mother faded before my eyes. "Forgive me," I whispered into the silence, though no one answered. The weight of my failures pressed down on me heavier than ever. Would history repeat itself? Or was there still time to rewrite the ending? The night was eerily silent, save for the faint rustle of leaves outside Kristina's window. She had spent hours plotting her escape, carefully folding a change of clothes into a small bag while her parents slept. Her heart pounded like a drum as she slit the window open, the cool air brushing against her face, a fleeting taste of freedom before reality closed in again. But fate was cruel. Just as her foot touched the ground outside, the porch light flickered on. Her father stood there, his silhouette framed by harsh yellow light, his voice cutting through the darkness like a blade. Where do you think you're going? He demanded, his tone dripping with fury. What followed was a storm of accusations and tears. Christina screamed back, her voice raw with desperation. You can't keep me locked up forever. She shouted, but her defiance only deepened their resolve. They confiscated her phone, blocked her access to social media, and confined her to her room, turning it into a gilded cage. Days passed in suffocating monotony, each hour stretching longer than the last. Meals were delivered silently, her parents avoiding eye contact as if ashamed of what they'd become. Yet Christina refused to surrender. During one heated confrontation, she hurled words that shattered the fragile peace. If you won't let me see him, I'll renounce everything. My inheritance, this family, all of it. Her declaration hung heavy in the air, a challenge neither parent knew how to counter. But the tension reached its breaking point late one evening when Christina swallowed an entire bottle of sleeping pills, her hands trembling as she stared at her reflection in the mirror. The world blurred around her as dizziness set in, her body collapsing onto the cold floor. Hours later, she woke up in a hospital bed, tubes snaking across her arms, her mother sobbing uncontrollably beside her. Why would you do this? Her mother cried, clutching her hand like a lifeline. We only wanted to protect you, protection or control. Christina didn't have the strength to argue anymore, but her eyes burned with unspoken resentment. Mikhailo paced outside the room, guilt gnawing at him. He had always believed discipline shaped character, yet now he questioned whether his actions had pushed his daughter too far. Igor, unaware of the chaos, sent frantic messages asking why Christina hadn't replied. Each unanswered text added another layer of anguish to an already unbearable situation. The air was thick with tension as Igor strummed the strings of Mikhailo's prized guitar, his fingers trembling slightly from nerves. It was supposed to be a casual lesson, just Vira, Igor, and the faint hum of rain tapping against the windows, but everything changed in an instant. A sharp crack echoed through the room as one of the strings snapped, sending a jarring note into the silence. Igor froze, his face pale, while Mikhailo stormed in moments later, drawn by the sound. His eyes narrowed at the sight of his son holding the now damaged instrument, its delicate craftsmanship marred forever. What have you done? Mikhailo barked, snatching the guitar away. Do you even understand what this means? This isn't just some cheap toy, it's irreplaceable. His voice rose with each word, filling the room with rage that made both Igor and Vera flinch. Igor stammered an apology, but it only fueled Mikhailo's fury. Apologies won't fix this. You're careless, reckless, just like your mother. The accusation hung heavy in the air, cutting deeper than any broken string could. Vera stepped forward hesitantly, her heart pounding. Please, Mr. Mikhailo, she began, her voice steady despite her fear. It was an accident. He didn't mean to. Stay out of this. Mikhailo snapped, turning on her with barely restrained anger. This is between me and my son. The exchange left Igor visibly shaken, guilt etched across his face. Later that evening, after Mikhailo had retreated to his study, Vera found herself sitting alone with Igor in the dimly lit living room. She watched him fidget with the hem of his shirt, his usual confidence replaced by quiet despair. I'm sorry, he muttered finally, more to himself than to her. I always mess things up. Moved by his vulnerability, Vera sighed softly. You're not the only one who's made mistakes, she admitted, her gaze distant. When I was your age, I dreamed of becoming a violinist. I practiced every day, pouring my soul into each note. But life, it doesn't always let you follow your dreams. Her voice cracked slightly as memories resurfaced of late nights, studying under flickering lights, of selling her beloved violin to pay for her mother's medical bills. Sometimes circumstances force you to give up things you love most. Igor listened intently, his expression softening with empathy. For the first time, he saw beyond Vera's composed exterior, glimpsing the pain she carried silently. "Do you regret it?" he asked quietly. "Every day," she replied, her tone tinged with sorrow. "But regrets don't change the past. They just remind us to cherish what we still have." Her words lingered in the air, bridging the gap between teacher and student, creating a bond neither had expected. Yet outside, the storm raged on, a reminder that forgiveness, like healing, was never easy. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows across the equestrian club's grounds as Vera approached the horse with hesitant steps. Her heart raced not from excitement, but from apprehension. She had never been on a horse this size before. The animal seemed calm at first, its sleek coat glinting under the golden light, but within moments it shifted unpredictably. Before she could steady herself, the horse reared up suddenly, throwing Vera off balance. She let out a sharp cry, clutching desperately at the saddle as her feet slipped free of the stirrups. For one terrifying second, she thought she would tumble to the ground. "Hold on!" Mikhailo's voice cut through the chaos like a whip. He sprinted toward her just in time, his arms wrapping around her waist to pull her down safely. Their bodies collided briefly, and for an instant their eyes locked, hers wide with shock, his filled with concern. It was over in seconds, yet the moment lingered heavily in the air, charged with something neither dared name. Unbeknownst to them, Ayare stood nearby, hidden behind a row of stables, her camera phone already poised. With a sly smile, she captured the scene, their proximity, the way Mikhailo held Vera protectively as evidence of betrayal. Later that evening, the photos circulated among acquaintances, accompanied by whispers. "Did you see how close they were? That teacher, is she trying to steal him away?" By morning, rumors spread like wildfire, painting Vera as a manipulative interloper seeking to destroy a marriage. When Vera heard about the gossip, her stomach churned with dread. How could one fleeting incident spiral so far out of control? "This isn't fair," she muttered under her breath, pacing her small apartment. The irony was cruel. Mikhailo had merely acted out of instinct, saving her from injury, yet now their names were entangled in scandal. Worse still, Igor caught wind of the rumors during lunch at school. His classmates teased him mercilessly, mocking his father's supposed infidelity. "Is it true?" he asked later, his voice trembling between anger and hurt. Vera hesitated, unsure how to respond without making things worse. As days passed, tension mounted. Mikhailo confronted Ira, demanding she stop spreading lies, but she only laughed bitterly. "You think I'm blind?" That picture speaks for itself. What began as a simple act of kindness now threatened to unravel everything: reputations, relationships, and trust, all because of a single misinterpreted moment. The rumors spread like wildfire, fueled by whispers at the market, glances in church, and hushed conversations over garden fences. By the time Vera walked down the street, she could feel the weight of judgment pressing on her shoulders. Eyes followed her everywhere, cold, accusing stares that made her skin crawl. "Isn't that her?" someone muttered as she passed a group of women near the bakery. Their laughter carried an edge of cruelty, slicing through whatever fragile composure she had managed to gather that morning. The town's gossip mill worked overtime, painting her as a conniving opportunist who used her role as Igor's tutor to infiltrate Mikhailo's wealthy household. One day, while grading papers in the teacher's lounge, Vera received an urgent summons from the principal's office. Her stomach sank as she read the note. A formal complaint had been filed against her by another parent, alleging misconduct. "She is exploiting her position for personal gain," the letter stated, each word dripping with venomous intent. It claimed that Vera's involvement with Mikhailo's family went beyond professional boundaries. implying ulterior motives. Panic surged through her veins. This wasn't just about reputation anymore, it was about survival. Sitting across from the stern-faced principal hours later, Vera clenched her fists tightly under the table, forcing herself to remain calm despite the storm raging inside her. "Miss Vera," the principal began, his voice heavy with disapproval, "these allegations are serious. If proven true, they could jeopardize your career, not just here, but anywhere." His words hit her like a sledgehammer. She wanted to scream, to explain how unfair it all was, but instead, she swallowed hard and replied, "I assure you, there is nothing inappropriate happening. I am simply doing my job." But even as she spoke, doubt lingered in the room. A stack of printed photos lay on the desk, between them images captured discreetly at the equestrian club, showing Mikhailo studying her after the horse incident. "Care to explain these?" the principal asked, sliding one photo toward her. Vera's throat tightened. "It's not what it looks like," she stammered, though she knew how weak her defense sounded. Outside the school gates later that evening, reporters loitered, shoving microphones into her face. "Is it true you're having an affair with Igor's father?" they demanded. Flashbulbs blinded her, turning her quiet walk home into a gauntlet of humiliation. Her phone buzzed incessantly with messages from colleagues distancing themselves, friends questioning her integrity, and strangers hurling insults. Alone in her apartment, she stared at the walls, feeling trapped in a nightmare she couldn't escape. For the first time, she questioned whether fighting back was worth it or if leaving everything behind might be the only way out. Vera's heart sank as she stared at the delicate necklace resting on her palm, its shimmering diamonds catching the light in a way that felt almost mocking. She had admired it briefly when Igor first gave it to her, touched by his thoughtfulness, or so she thought. But now, after overhearing a heated argument between Mikhailo and Igor earlier that day, the truth hit her like a freight train. The jewelry wasn't just expensive. It was stolen from Mikhailo's own collection. Her stomach churned with dread as she realized the implications of accepting such a gift. How could Igor do this? And why hadn't she questioned its origin sooner? The next morning, Vera wrapped the necklace carefully in velvet cloth and drove to Mikhailo's estate, her hands gripping the steering wheel tightly. Every passing mile seemed to stretch longer than the last, dread pooling in her chest. When she arrived, she hesitated before knocking on the door, rehearsing what she would say, but no amount of preparation could ease the tension once she stepped inside. Mikhailo greeted her with his usual cold politeness, but his eyes narrowed slightly when she placed the small bundle on the table. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, her voice steady despite the turmoil raging within her. Mikhailo unwrapped the cloth slowly, his expression darkening as recognition dawned. "Where did you get this?" he asked sharply, his tone cutting through the silence like a blade. Vera swallowed hard. "Your son gave it to me. I only discovered recently that it wasn't his to give." Mikhailo's jaw tightened visibly, and for a moment, Vera feared the worst. Was she being accused of complicity? Before she could explain further, Igor appeared in the doorway, pale and trembling. His father turned to him, fury blazing in his eyes. "Did you steal this from my safe?" Igor stammered an apology, but Mikhailo cut him off. "You've disgraced this family enough. Do you have any idea how reckless you are?" Vera watched the exchange silently, guilt gnawing at her, even though she knew she'd done nothing wrong. Still, returning the necklace had been misinterpreted by Igor, who saw it as a rejection of his affection, and perhaps even by Mikhailo, whose gaze lingered on her with suspicion. As she left the house, clutching her bag tightly, she couldn't shake the feeling that this incident had deepened the rift between them all. What if Mikhailo believed she had manipulated Igor into stealing it? Trust, already fragile, now teetered on the edge of collapse. The doctor's words still echoed in Vera's mind as she sat in the dimly lit waiting room, clutching the crumpled diagnosis paper. Stage 4 cancer. No time to waste. The surgery and chemotherapy were her mother's only chance at survival, but $30,000 might as well have been $1 million given her circumstances. Each tick of the clock felt like another nail in her coffin, every second pushing them closer to an inevitable end. Her phone buzzed unexpectedly, snapping her out of her daze. A blocked number flashed on the screen. Against her better judgment, she answered. "Miss Vira?" The voice on the other end was smooth, almost too calm, sending a shiver down her spine. "We've been watching you. Your resourceful, resilient qualities we admire." "Who is this?" she demanded, her pulse quickening. "No need for names," the caller replied coolly. "Let's just say we're aware of your situation, your mother's illness, your financial struggles. We can help." Vera froze, her breath catching in her throat. "Help? From whom? And at what cost? What do you want?" She whispered, dread pooling in her stomach. "It's simple," the voice continued. "Work for us for 6 months and we'll cover every penny of your mother's treatment. All expenses paid." Her mind raced with questions. What kind of work? Who were these people? But before she could ask, the caller added, "Think carefully. This offer expires tonight. If you refuse, well..." There was a pause, heavy with implication. "We won't interfere further." That night, Vera lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the weight of the decision crushing her. Accepting meant stepping into the unknown, a world likely riddled with danger and moral compromise. Refusing meant watching her mother slip away, day by agonizing day. She thought about Igor, Mikhailo, the endless gossip that had already turned her life upside down. Was this some twisted consequence of her past actions? Or was it simply fate mocking her desperation? By morning, exhaustion etched deep lines into her face. Sitting beside her mother's hospital bed, she watched the frail woman struggle to breathe. How could she choose between morality and survival? Between dignity and love? As tears streamed down her cheeks, Vera realized there was no real choice at all. The tension in the house was palpable as Ira scrolled through Mikhailo's phone, her hands trembling with a mix of rage and betrayal. There they were, messages exchanged between him and Vera, innocuous at first glance but damning in context. "Checking up on you," one read. Another, "Let me know if there's anything else I can do." To Ira, these words carried hidden meanings, proof that her husband hadn't let go of the woman who had infiltrated their lives. Her blood boiled as she confronted him later that evening, slamming the phone onto the dining table. "How dare you?" she hissed, her voice low but venomous. "After everything we've been through, you're still talking to her? Do you think I'm blind?" "It's not what it looks like," Mikhailo snapped back, though his hesitation betrayed him. "She's just helping Igor. That's all. Helping? Or comforting?" Ira shot back, her eyes blazing. "You forget I know how men like you operate. You don't give without expecting something in return." Their argument escalated into a shouting match, each word cutting deeper than the last. Krishna, drawn by the commotion, appeared in the doorway, her face pale with shock. "What's going on?" she asked hesitantly, but neither parent noticed her presence until it was too late. In her fury, Ira blurted out the truth, revealing every suspicion she'd harbored about Mikhailo and Vira. The room fell silent, save for Kristina's sharp intake of breath. Betrayal flickered across her face as she whispered, "Is this why you've been so cruel to Igor?" Meanwhile, Vera sat alone in her apartment when an unexpected knock came at the door. Standing outside was a man she barely recognized, a wealthy acquaintance of Mikhailo's, older and impeccably dressed. His smile was polite but calculating as he handed her a small velvet box containing a diamond ring. "Marry me," he said simply, his tone leaving no room for negotiation. "I'll cover your mother's medical expenses entirely. Every penny. All I ask is your hand in marriage." Vera froze, her mind racing. Was this salvation or exploitation? Could she live with herself if she accepted such a deal? As tears welled up in her eyes, she realized the choice wasn't hers to make, not truly. Her mother's life hung in the balance, and pride seemed like a luxury she could no longer afford. The cold wind whipped against Vera's face as she stood outside the hospital, clutching the latest test results in trembling hands. Her mother's condition had worsened. Each word on the paper felt like a nail being hammered into her heart. She stared blankly at the words, unable to process them fully. Could she keep fighting? Or was this battle too heavy for one person to bear alone? The weight of responsibility pressed down on her chest, suffocating and relentless. Every second stretched endlessly, filled with doubt and fear. Her phone buzzed violently in her pocket, snapping her out of her daze. It was Mikhailo. Hesitating for a moment, she answered, bracing herself for whatever he might say. His voice came through low but steady, tinged with vulnerability. "I've divorced Ira," he began without preamble. "This isn't about guilt or obligation. It's about what I want now. I want us to start over." Vera's breath caught in her throat. Start over? How could he even suggest that after everything they'd been through? After all the pain, rumors, and sacrifices? "I can't," she whispered, her voice cracking under the strain. "You don't understand. Coming between you and your family, it's already caused so much damage. I won't let myself be responsible for more." Silence lingered on the other end, heavy with unspoken emotions. Finally, Mikhailo sighed deeply. "You always think of others before yourself. But sometimes holding back is just another form of destruction." That night, Vera sat at her kitchen table, penning a letter to Mikhailo by candlelight. Each word flowed painfully from her soul, raw and honest. "Thank you for everything, for helping my mother, for believing in me when no one else did. But true happiness doesn't come from running away or starting over. It comes from acceptance and forgiveness. Yours, mine, and ours together. Please don't mistake my refusal for ingratitude. I only wish to protect what little peace we have left." As she sealed the envelope, tears blurred her vision. Outside, the city buzzed with life, oblivious to her turmoil. For the first time, Vera allowed herself to imagine a future where she wasn't defined by loss or regret, a future shaped not by despair, but by resilience. Yet the road ahead remained uncertain, shadowed by unanswered questions. Would she find the strength to carry on? Only time would tell.